passing a local Catholic church. Wonder if they're talking about what's coming down the pike. Asking their God to please help them through the situation at hand. And it's not just one hand, it's both handfuls that are gonna stagger the imagination here shortly. Many years ago, I got the nickname as Dr. Doom, which is funny, from a very good friend of mine. And I think that was a spin-off from, what was his name? Kevorkian. You remember that fella? Yeah. It was wrong for Kevorkian to do what he did. And perhaps some of you folks remember, perhaps some don't, the controversy over assisted suicide. Assisted suicide. Think about that term for a second. Assisted suicide. What comes up in your mind? Well, what comes up in my mind is the last 2 years. And who's been the assister of this suicide that America as a whole has been on, long before Kevorkian should have outlawed that, prior to Iraq, prior to Libya, which a lot of people really don't know. Just throw those names out, Iraq and Libya, and it really doesn't paint the picture that it ought to paint. You have no idea about what Libya was. You might want to look into, there's a real interesting video you can find, probably still on YouTube. And I believe it was under the title of the world's largest water project. Yeah. And then if you put the world's largest water project and then type in Libya, you'll find it. Watch it. Should be about 20 minutes long. Could be a little longer. And what they did is Gaddafi and his boogeymen did is they tapped into what's called primary water, something that most of you don't know anything about. Primary water. If you drill deep enough, water's not an issue ever. Well, generations upon generations upon generations, it'll never be an issue. Currently, we're drinking toilet water. But if you go to primary water, yeah, it's loaded with all kinds of goodies. And I do mean goodies. Very healthy, very clean, and it's very deep. In neighborhood of like 40,000 feet. Anyhow, they tapped into primary water. And the goal was, Muammar's goal, seemed to be a pretty decent fella. Wore a funny hat. But yeah, you need to look into who he was to get the perspective on who your elected officials are, or were, because elections are over with. I don't know when they'll ever come back. But what you think is an election is over. It's all selection. That aside, they tapped into primary water, with the idea of turning the Saharan desert into a grow factory. And we're not talking weed here. We're talking food. Exactly what we are going to be experiencing and already are a lack of for the next few years. To where we're going to have to decide if we want to turn our heat on or if we want to eat. And turning the heat on might be a little difficult. And eating or finding sustenance is certainly going to be difficult, especially if you live in a food desert. If you don't know what that is, boy, are you behind the times. So anyhow, we had the Clintonistas and their propaganda machine that told us he was a boogeyman and needed to be taken out. And they literally went in there and decimated Libya and the Libyan people. Just flipped it upside down 180 degrees, turned it into a less than third world country. Basically overnight, basically in the grand scheme of things. And we're happy about it. The most educated people on the planet at the time. Yep. Definitely the most educated people on the planet. Not like us here in the United States, where we're forced to go to 15,000 hours of lunacy, which is K through 12, and you graduate now, that's a weird word, graduate into more lunacy, which is the $40,000 to $100,000 a year parking lots called universities. And you come out of that dumb as a box of rocks, flipping burgers at McDonald's. So I don't know what they're going to do next. We'll talk about that another time. While supplies last, meaning signal. Because that's going to be an issue here in a minute too. It already is for a lot of people. Anyhow, have a good day.